Imagine opening your mouth and speaking English with ease. Your thoughts are clear. Your words come naturally. You do not pause to translate every sentence in your head. And you are not controlled by the fear of making mistakes. Perhaps that feels impossible to you right now. But what if the real secret to speaking English fluently is not learning more grammar or memorizing hundreds of difficult words? What if the real secret is learning how to train your brain to use English in a faster and more natural way? Your brain becomes better at what you ask it to do repeatedly. When you train it consistently, the connections you need become stronger, quicker, and easier to access. The problem is that many learners spend years studying English, but they rarely train themselves to think and respond in English. They recognize words, understand grammar rules, and complete exercises, yet speaking still feels slow and stressful. In this video, I want to show you how to change that. You will discover practical listening habits, simple thinking exercises, and effective speaking techniques that can help English feel more familiar and automatic. If you have ever felt shy, frustrated, or completely stuck when trying to speak, stay with me until the end. Today, you are not simply going to study English. You are going to begin building an English-speaking brain. And if you enjoy practical lessons that help you speak with greater confidence, subscribe to Lumina Academy and continue learning with us. English learning is often presented as a process of memorizing vocabulary lists and studying grammar rules. Many learners spend hours trying to remember difficult words, verb forms, and sentence structures. They believe that the more words they memorize, the more fluently they will speak. But this approach often leads to disappointment. A learner may recognize thousands of English words and still be unable to use them naturally in a real conversation. The words exist in the learner's memory, but they do not appear quickly enough when it is time to speak. The reason is simple. Learning words is not enough. If you want to speak English fluently, you need to train your brain, not only fill your memory. When you hear or read English, your brain begins connecting sounds, meanings, situations, and language patterns. At first, these connections may be weak. That is why a beginner often needs a long pause before answering a simple question. The learner may be trying to remember a grammar rule, find the right vocabulary, translate a thought, and control pronunciation at the same time. With so many tasks happening together, speaking naturally becomes extremely difficult. Fortunately, these connections can improve through the right kind of practice. Think about physical training. If you exercise a muscle regularly, it becomes stronger and more efficient. An athlete practices the same movements repeatedly until the body can perform them quickly and naturally. Speaking English develops in a similar way. When you listen, think, and speak in English regularly, your brain creates stronger pathways for understanding and communication. With enough meaningful repetition, sentences that once required great effort begin to feel familiar. This is the difference between memorizing English and training with English. Memorization is often passive. You read a word, repeat it a few times, and hope you will remember it later. Training is active. You hear the word in a meaningful situation. You connect it with an image or experience. You place it inside a sentence, speak it aloud, and use it to express one of your own thoughts. That active use encourages your brain to process the language more deeply. Over time, you can understand and respond without needing to think about every individual word. Language is not simply a collection of separate words. It is a system of familiar patterns. Imagine that you regularly hear sentences such as, "I'm getting ready for work," "I'm getting ready for class," "I'm getting ready to leave." After hearing this structure many times, your brain begins to recognize the pattern. Later, you can create a new sentence naturally. "I'm getting ready for an important meeting." You did not need to analyze every grammatical detail. Your brain recognized a familiar structure and used it to express a new idea. This is how much of natural language learning happens. Repeated exposure helps the brain recognize common structures, rhythms, and combinations of words. Listening to podcasts, watching useful videos, and reading clear English give your brain the input it needs. In the beginning, you may not understand every sentence, and that is completely normal. Your first goal is not to understand 100% of everything you hear. Your goal is to give your brain enough understandable English to become familiar with the sound and flow of the language. Speaking practice is equally important. Every time you speak, your brain must organize an idea, find suitable words, arrange them into a sentence, and send that sentence to your mouth. Even a very simple sentence strengthens the connection between thought and speech. You can begin with what is happening around you. I'm drinking a glass of water. I'm studying English. I'm sitting beside the window. I'm waiting for a message. These sentences may seem easy, but they are doing something important. They are teaching your brain how to turn a real thought directly into spoken English. Once a sentence feels comfortable, expand it. I'm drinking a glass of water because I've just finished exercising. I'm studying English, but I'm finding it difficult to concentrate today. I'm sitting beside the window, and I can hear people talking outside. Begin with what you can say, and then add more detail. Consistency is one of the most important parts of this training. Some learners study intensely for several hours, and then avoid English for the rest of the week. This makes progress slower because the brain needs regular contact and repetition to maintain strong language connections. 10 or 15 focused minutes every day can be more effective than one long session followed by several days of silence. Daily practice keeps English active in your mind. It teaches your brain that English is not something you use only during a lesson. It is something that belongs in your everyday life. You can create practice opportunities almost anywhere. While preparing a meal, describe what you are doing. I'm washing the vegetables. I'm heating the pan. I'm preparing dinner for my family. While walking outside, describe what you notice. The sky looks cloudy. The weather feels cooler today. There are several people waiting at the bus stop. The street is much busier than it was this morning. These small exercises turn ordinary activities into valuable speaking practice. When you repeat them regularly, your brain slowly becomes more comfortable forming thoughts in English. Be patient with this process. Training your brain takes time, just as training your body takes time. At the beginning, your progress may feel slow. You may pause often, forget familiar vocabulary, or make mistakes in simple sentences. That does not mean your practice is failing. Every honest attempt to think or speak in English gives your brain another opportunity to learn. Gradually, the pauses become shorter. Familiar expressions begin to appear more quickly, and speaking starts to feel less uncomfortable. Confidence grows when your brain becomes familiar with using English. Instead of worrying about every grammar rule while you speak, you begin paying attention to the meaning you want to communicate. You realize that conversation is about sharing thoughts, needs, experiences, and emotions. It is not a grammar examination. When your attention moves from perfection to communication, your mind relaxes. A relaxed mind can retrieve language more easily and respond more naturally. The message is simple. Fluency does not come only from memorizing vocabulary. It develops through regular exposure, active use, meaningful repetition, and consistent habits. When English becomes a form of daily training, your brain gradually adapts. The language becomes easier to understand and much easier to use. Instead of translating every thought, you begin processing familiar ideas directly in English. But translating is one of the biggest obstacles many learners face. In the beginning, translation feels natural because your native language is the system your brain knows best. When you want to speak English, you may first create the complete sentence in your own language. Then, you search for English words to replace each part. This may seem helpful at first, but it quickly becomes a barrier to fluent communication. When you translate word by word, your brain has to complete two separate tasks. First, it creates the thought in your native language. Then it attempts to rebuild the same thought in English. That additional step requires time and mental energy. During a real conversation, people may speak quickly. You do not have unlimited time to construct every response. If you depend on translation, you may pause for too long, become nervous, or forget what you originally wanted to say. Translation can also produce unnatural sentences, because languages do not always organize ideas in the same way. A sentence that sounds completely natural in your native language may require a different structure in English. If you translate it word for word, the result may sound confusing or unnatural, even when every individual word seems correct. To speak more fluently, you need to help your brain create thoughts directly in English. This does not happen immediately, and you do not need to force yourself to stop translating every thought in a single day. You gradually reduce translation by building direct connections between English and the world around you. Begin with simple words and familiar situations. When you see a table, try to connect the object directly with the English word table. Do not first say the word in your native language and then translate it. When you see rain, think, it's raining. When you feel tired, think, I need to rest. When you are hungry, think, I want something to eat. These thoughts are simple enough to form directly in English. With repetition, they become automatic. The next step is to think in short sentences about your daily activities. When you wake up, you might think, I'm still tired. I need to get out of bed. I have a lot to do today. While getting ready, you might think, I'm looking for my shirt. I need to leave in 20 minutes. I hope the traffic is not too heavy. During lunch, you might think, this food tastes good. I'm eating too quickly. I should drink more water. This private inner speech is a safe and effective form of practice. No one is listening. No one is correcting you. You can experiment without pressure and repeat a sentence as many times as necessary. As these simple thoughts become easier, make them slightly longer. Instead of saying, I'm tired, say, I'm tired because I didn't sleep well last night. Instead of saying, I need to leave, say, I need to leave soon, or I'll be late for work. Instead of saying, the food is good, say, the food is delicious, but it is a little too spicy for me. Your goal is not to create the most advanced sentence possible. Your goal is to create a sentence directly in English, at a level you can comfortably control. Images can also help you reduce translation. Choose a photograph of an ordinary place, such as a market, a park, a train station, or a family kitchen. Look carefully at the image and describe what you can see. There is a woman carrying a shopping bag. Two children are standing near the entrance. A man is looking at his phone. The market appears busy. Then imagine what might be happening. The woman may be buying food for dinner. The children could be waiting for their parents. The man might be checking the time. By connecting English to visual information, you teach your brain to create meaning without passing through your native language first. You can use the same method with objects around your home. Look at a lamp and say, this is a lamp. It is beside my bed. I usually turn it on when I read at night. Look at a refrigerator and say, the refrigerator is in the kitchen. There is not much food inside it. I need to go shopping tomorrow. One object can produce several useful sentences. The more often you make these direct connections, the less dependent you become on translation. Another effective method is to learn words inside phrases instead of learning them alone. Do not memorize only the word decision. Learn, make a decision. Do not memorize only attention. Learn, pay attention. Do not learn only afraid. Learn afraid of making mistakes. Do not learn only interested. Learn interested in learning more. Phrases are easier to use because they give your brain a ready-made structure. In conversation, you do not need to build everything from the beginning. You can retrieve a familiar phrase and add the information you need. For example, I need to make a decision. I made a difficult decision yesterday. It may take me a few days to make a final decision. The phrase remains familiar while the rest of the sentence changes. This is how useful patterns create speed. You can practice one pattern by creating several personal examples. Take the structure. I'm trying to improve my pronunciation. I'm trying to wake up earlier. I'm trying to spend less time on my phone. I'm trying to become more confident when I speak. Now choose one of those sentences and extend it. I'm trying to improve my pronunciation, so I listen carefully and repeat short sentences every day. This type of practice trains you to form English sentences without translating each one from your native language. You are learning how English expresses an idea, then using that structure to express an idea of your own. It is also important to accept simple English. Some learners translate because they are trying to create a complicated sentence that is beyond their current speaking level. They may have a detailed thought in their native language and believe they must reproduce every detail perfectly in English. When they cannot, they freeze. Instead, ask yourself, what is the simplest way to communicate this idea? Suppose you cannot remember the word exhausted. You can say, I'm extremely tired. If you cannot remember disappointed, you can say, I'm not happy with what happened. If you forget the word appointment, you can say, I have a meeting with the doctor at 3. Communication does not stop because one word is missing. Fluent speakers do not always use the most sophisticated word. They use the clearest language available to them and keep the conversation moving. Thinking in English does not mean that every sentence in your mind must be grammatically perfect. It means that you are developing the habit of connecting your thoughts directly with English. Mistakes are part of that development. If you wait until you can create perfect sentences, you may spend years waiting. But if you begin with simple, imperfect thoughts and continue practicing, your sentences will gradually become more accurate and natural. Repetition helps this change happen. When you use the same useful structure in several different situations, your brain becomes familiar with it. The sentence pattern becomes easier to retrieve, and you spend less time thinking about grammar. Over time, English stops feeling like a puzzle that must be rebuilt piece by piece. It begins to feel like a tool you can use. And once English becomes a tool you can use, the next step is to make that tool part of your environment. Learning any language becomes easier when your brain meets that language regularly. One of the most effective ways to improve your speaking is to surround yourself with English every day. This is often called immersion. Immersion does not mean that you must study English for several hours without stopping. It simply means creating an environment in which English becomes a normal part of your daily life. When your brain frequently hears and sees English, it gradually becomes familiar with the language. Sounds that once seemed unclear become easier to recognize. Common expressions begin to feel predictable, and sentence patterns become easier to remember and use. Some learners believe that immersion is only possible if they move to an English-speaking country. That is not true. You can create a useful English environment wherever you live. With a phone, an internet connection, and a few consistent habits, you can bring English into your home and your daily routine. The goal is not to remove your native language from your life. The goal is to give English a small but permanent place in your day. Listening is one of the easiest ways to begin. You can listen to an English podcast while walking, commuting, exercising, preparing food, or relaxing at home. Podcasts allow you to hear real voices, useful expressions, and natural conversations. You do not need to understand every word for the experience to be valuable. When you listen regularly, your brain is becoming familiar with English pronunciation, rhythm, and sentence structure. At first, you may hear a fast stream of sounds. After repeated exposure, your brain begins separating that stream into words and phrases. Something that sounded unclear last month may suddenly sound obvious today. That improvement is not magic. It is the result of repeated contact. Videos are another useful part of an English environment because they combine sound with visual information. When you can see a person's actions, facial expressions, and surroundings, it becomes easier to understand what the words mean. You might watch videos about travel, food, education, technology, personal development, or daily life. Choose subjects you already enjoy. When the topic interests you, you are more likely to continue listening. Television programs and films can also introduce you to English in realistic situations. You can observe how people greet one another, ask questions, disagree politely, express emotions, and respond during a conversation. Pay attention to the small expressions people use. Are you serious? That makes sense. I'm not sure about that. Give me a moment. These short expressions may not appear in traditional vocabulary lists, but they are extremely useful in real communication. If a program feels too difficult, begin with English subtitles. Use them to connect the sounds you hear with the words on the screen. However, do not depend on subtitles forever. After watching a short scene with subtitles, play it again without them. Focus on the situation and the main message. You may understand more than you expect. As your listening becomes stronger, use subtitles less often. They should support your listening, not replace it. Music can also help you become familiar with the sound of English. Songs contain rhythm, repetition, and emotion, which can make certain words and phrases easier to remember. You may find yourself repeating a line because you have heard it many times. That repetition allows you to practice English sounds without making the activity feel like a formal lesson. Use music as an enjoyable addition to your routine, but remember that song lyrics do not always reflect ordinary conversation. Songs may stretch words, change normal stress, or use poetic grammar. Enjoy them for sound and motivation, while learning conversational patterns from clear spoken English. Reading is another important part of immersion. Short articles, simple stories, and accessible books allow you to see how English sentences are organized. Reading introduces vocabulary in context and shows you how ideas connect across complete sentences. You do not need to begin with difficult novels or academic texts. Material that is too challenging can make reading slow and frustrating. Choose something you can mostly understand. A short article about travel, health, food, hobbies, work, or technology may be more useful than a complicated book you are not ready to enjoy. Even a few focused paragraphs each day can strengthen your vocabulary and your understanding of English structure. When you find a useful expression, do not only underline it. Say it aloud. Then create a new sentence with it. If you read, "I ran out of time," you might say, "I ran out of time before the meeting." "I wanted to exercise, but I ran out of time." "We ran out of time, so we will finish the discussion tomorrow." This turns reading into speaking practice. Another simple immersion technique is to place English labels on objects around your home. You might label the mirror, the refrigerator, a drawer, a shelf, or the light switch. Every time you see the label, your brain connects the English word directly with the object. This can be useful when you are still learning common household vocabulary. But do not stop with the name of the object. After you become familiar with the word, create a sentence. The mirror needs to be cleaned. There is some fruit in the refrigerator. I keep my documents in this drawer. The books on that shelf belong to my brother. In this way, a label becomes the beginning of a real thought. You can also change the language settings on one application you use frequently. You do not need to change everything at once. Choose something familiar, such as a music application or a simple calendar. Because you already understand how the application works, you can connect English words such as search, save, share, edit, and delete with actions you perform every day. The purpose of immersion is not to make your life difficult. It is to create frequent, manageable contact with English. 10 or 15 minutes of daily exposure can produce meaningful results when you use that time consistently. A short English video today, a podcast tomorrow morning, and a simple article in the evening all keep the language active in your memory. Daily contact is often more effective than a long session that happens only once in a while. When English becomes part of your entertainment and ordinary activities, learning can feel more natural and less stressful. You are no longer depending entirely on willpower to sit at a desk and study. You are allowing English to appear in moments that already exist. Over time, unfamiliar sounds become familiar. Words that once felt difficult begin to appear naturally in your thoughts. Your brain starts recognizing expressions more quickly and responding with less effort. But exposure alone is not enough. There is an important difference between hearing English and listening to English. You can play an English podcast for 1 hour while your attention is somewhere else. The sound may create some familiarity, but your progress will be limited if you never focus on the meaning. To improve more effectively, you need active listening. Active listening means giving your full attention to a short piece of spoken English. You listen for the speaker's message, pronunciation, tone, rhythm, and choice of words. You are not trying to capture every single word. You are trying to understand what the speaker wants to communicate. Choose a short recording that matches your level. It may be a 30-second conversation, 1 minute from a podcast, or a small part of a video. Listen once without stopping. Ask yourself, what is the main idea? Do not worry if some words are unclear. Focus on the general message. Then listen again. This time, notice the expressions the speaker uses. Where does the voice become stronger? Where does the speaker pause? Which words seem to carry the main meaning? Pause after one sentence. Think about what you heard. Then say the idea aloud in your own words. Suppose the speaker says, "I planned to finish the report this morning, but an unexpected phone call took most of my time." You might explain, "She wanted to complete her report, but a long phone call interrupted her." Your sentence does not need to copy the original. The goal is to show that you understood the meaning and can express it yourself. Next, listen to the original sentence again and repeat it as closely as you can. This creates a connection between hearing and speaking. Short listening sessions are especially useful because they allow you to concentrate without becoming overwhelmed. If you choose 10 minutes of difficult speech, your attention may disappear after the first minute. A short recording can be repeated several times. Each repetition can have a different purpose. The first time, listen for the main idea. The second time, notice the words. The third time, focus on pronunciation and rhythm. The fourth time, repeat with the speaker. The fifth time, explain the message independently. You are using the same piece of English, but your brain is processing it more deeply each time. This is often more valuable than listening to a large amount of content only once. Listening is the foundation of speaking because your brain must first become familiar with how English sounds. Think about how children learn their first language. They spend a long period hearing voices before they can form complete sentences. Their brains absorb sounds, expressions, and patterns through repeated exposure. As adult learners, we learn differently and can use explanations and study methods. But the basic connection between listening and speaking remains important. Before you can produce a language naturally, your brain needs clear examples of that language. At first, natural English may sound too fast because spoken words do not always sound the way they appear on a page. Speakers connect words, reduce certain sounds, and place greater stress on the most important parts of a sentence. For example, the written question is, "What are you going to do?" In natural conversation, it may sound much faster and more connected. If you have only seen the sentence in writing, you may struggle to recognize it when someone says it quickly. Regular listening teaches your brain to recognize these natural changes. Pronunciation also becomes easier to understand when you hear words in complete sentences. English spelling is not always a reliable guide to pronunciation. The same letters may represent different sounds, and some written letters may become very soft or silent in speech. Listening helps you learn what words actually sound like. It also teaches you the rhythm of English. Every language has its own rhythm. In English, speakers usually give more stress to the words carrying the main information and less stress to smaller grammatical words. Listen to this sentence. I need to send the email before lunch. The words need, send, email, and lunch carry the main message. The other words are present, but they are usually lighter. Try saying it naturally. I need to send the email before lunch. Now change the information. I need to finish the project before Friday. I need to call my manager after the meeting. I need to buy some groceries on the way home. When you listen carefully to natural English, your brain begins to absorb these patterns. Later, your own sentences may follow a clearer